I will move it.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Item number 2, approval of the meeting minutes from January 2nd, 2024. I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Item number 3, discussion on LEC maintenance fund. And we have Dale Brent here from Baker Group, and I would call on Shane to introduce Dale and give us an overview of what Dale will be doing.
All right. This is
And
Shane.
I would also ask that when everyone speaks, please speak in the microphone so we get proper recording.
And make sure you also state your name and your address, please, for the record. Ron, did you remember to bring copies over this for everybody?
I did not.
Okay. I'll make some copies while everybody's doing it. I'd like to ask, we're going to hand this document out to everybody here, if you would accept that. Okay. Motion to accept.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, make copies. So I'd like to bring up Dale Drent. Dale Drent is the Vice President of our service, a professional engineer, and has spent a bunch of time on this maintenance stuff, and is an expert in his field as always. So I'll bring Dale up, please, to the mic and spend a few minutes introducing yourself. Stall so I can get copies of this.
Certainly. Dale Drent with the Baker Group, office out of Ankeny. Stalling a little bit, I'm a Vikings fan. We haven't won any Super Bowls. I don't see us winning any Super Bowls in the near future either.
In our defense, it's because we hate the Packers so much that we would never
We
want a
burn.
Lombardi trophy.
We burn our energy on hating the Packers. Amen. No, so appreciate you having me come today. I've worked with Shane quite a bit here in the county on various projects that come up. A lot of it having to do with kind of the financial side. Like Shane mentioned, I'm a mechanical engineer, licensed mechanical engineer, spent about a decade early on in my career designing buildings. Vice president of our service group, so spent a lot of time evaluating designs and then also helping building owners understand the building that they've just built and what it's going to take to operate it from a skill set standpoint, and then also financially, utilities, energy projects, things of that nature. And really what to expect, and then doing some benchmarking financially of how much should they expect to spend and how much are they actually spending. If that comes in alignment, that's great. If there's some misalignment, being able to identify what's causing that misalignment financially. So for the LEC specifically, started I think back in 2020 was the first time we got together and intentionally spent some time looking at what would the operations budget be for that facility. Using some, starting off initially with some rules of thumb for dollars per square foot for different types of activity, maintenance activity, to identify the order of magnitude of what it would take to run the building on an annual basis. So I've been a resource. I've come up here not intentionally once every other month, but approximately once every other month I end up here meeting with Shane, being part of some of the various meetings related to the project or other things that Kenny Schmitz might need. As a resource as well. So that's a little bit about me and kind of what my role is and the history and stuff I've done here at the county. Shane, did I leave anything out? Included the bit about the Vikings.
I heard the Vikings thing.
Okay.
So I've handed out a document. I would like to spend a couple, 3 minutes with everybody here scoring. C stands for county's responsibility, M stands for maintenance fund. This is not an all-inclusive list by any way, shape, or form, but I would like to see where all your authority sits before Dale finishes, and Dale, please score it as well. All right?
Certainly.
Test time will start. And I will give him a copy. I'll give him mine when we finish.
Yeah, and the missing piece for me is understanding kind of the definition of the separation between the county responsibility and the maintenance fund. That's somewhat specific to this situation here. The definitions I use when I'm thinking about maintenance and repairs is routine maintenance, preventive maintenance, and then emergency repairs. So that's easy to, there's an easier separation there. But in this particular situation, being able to identify as it a county or as a maintenance fund issue, if you could give me some, remind me again of particulars of this building and the definition of the maintenance fund, what it's intended to be, and then the county.
That's really what we're trying to decide. That's the whole purpose of this meeting, is to have that conversation about what each of those things are, which items will get C's and F's to be paid for by the county out of Kenny's normal operating budget, or paid for out of his maintenance fund. That's really what this exercise is all about, because nobody has a defined answer. Everybody is all over the board on this. So I would like to get you guys' all opinion, and then we'll talk about it. Because I thought that to be the best way to do this.
Yep.
One thing that might have been a good guide is part of the reason for a maintenance fund, in my opinion, and what we sold to the public, was the current facility that's in very bad shape. And so you mentioned emergency repairs, but just repairs that if they're deferred or ignored, that could hurt the structure, that could hurt the building itself.
And that was one of the things where you talked about
Yeah.
preventative maintenance. So preventative or predictive maintenance is something that everybody on the authorities told me you're very cognizant of. You want to keep going to maintain this equipment in great working order for as long as that it can. But then at the end of its life expectancy, then have a fund in place to be able to replace that equipment that is reached the end of its useful life. So Dale, if you spend a little bit of time, let's pick a few things. Pick a boiler. Talk about its useful life.
Sure. Yeah, so boiler's kind of I'm glad you picked that one because that's kind of a weird piece of equipment. It's called a boiler, but it doesn't boil water. It actually just heats water up. We've stuck with the name of boiler because when we initially started heating buildings after World War II, there were a lot of people that understood how steam worked. They worked with steam on ships. And so we had boilers that actually boiled water and sent steam through pipes. When this building built, right behind you is a steam radiator. This building would have been served by a steam boiler. Hot water heating is much more efficient from an energy standpoint. So there aren't very many HVAC systems that include steam, but we stuck with the name boiler. So even though it doesn't boil water, we still call it a boiler. And if you think of boilers that were built back in the 1950s, they'd last 40, 50 years because they're really thick. The materials they were made of are really thick. Efficiency, maybe 60% efficient. Boilers that are made today, high efficiency boilers, the way they get, if you spend $1 on natural gas, the way you get 95 cents worth of heating out of that dollar that you spend instead of sending it up the flue is the heat exchange surface is very, very thin. And so in a boiler, the failure point in a boiler is a heat exchanger. Metal expands, contracts, and eventually cracks. So your heat exchanger is kind of the weakest link in a boiler that's made today. And so high efficiency boilers typically have a 18 to 20 year lifespan, where a 1960s boiler that was built to make steam would last for 50 years. So I'm glad you picked the boiler as for instance. As technology gets more and more efficient, systems are always running closer to the ragged edge of failure. Super efficient systems typically have a shorter lifespan. But a boiler, for instance, the advancements in boiler technology have been great because it saves a lot of energy on the utility bill. The downside is instead of having a 60-year lifespan, you've got probably about a 20-year lifespan. So knowing that in advance and saying, hey, 20 years from now, we have 4 boilers, they're all brand new today, but 20 years from now, we're going to need to spend maybe $1.2 million replacing those boilers. And the maintenance fund intentionally setting that up so that when that 20-year life hits, maybe your replacement year 18, maybe you get 24 years of life out of them. But the magnitude of what it's going to cost and the approximate time frame there's absolute time lifespans to every single building component. And so to Shane's point, kind of line by line, picking different systems, whether it's a mechanical system or it's concrete or it's a roofing membrane, knowing what the lifespan really is step number one. What's the typical lifespan of that, and then knowing the magnitude of replacing that.
So I'm gonna get you a thing that
Yep.
takes it. A lot of everybody here has water heaters in their house and building. Let's talk about the water heaters at the jail. So we have PVI water heaters here, which are basically another boiler. And they have some parts to them. So would you help with that? So we have large PVI water heaters, they will heat 1,365 gallons per hour. It's the amount of water you can run through this boiler. I mean, this water heater. And there is 6 of them.
So your question there is lifespan?
Lifespan and talk,
Yeah.
just because everybody's not gonna understand. When you think of the water heater in your house, you think of this small thing. This water heater is 6 foot tall and 3 foot in diameter. Just to give you an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, so a commercial grade water heater is gonna last, and in the application that you have, it's probably an 18 to 20-year lifespan. Again, a lot of that has to do with the technology for the heat exchange surface, and the heat exchange is what separates the fire from the water. It's a gas-fired water heater, so you burn natural gas, and it obviously lights a flame, and there's metal that separates the flame from the water that is heating. In order to get the most energy transferred from that fire into the water is to have your heat exchange surface really thin. So a water heater like that, you may, if it's gonna last, if the frame of that water heater maybe is gonna last, say 25 years, halfway through that, you may replace a heat exchanger or a burner. You're not replacing the whole thing, but there may be components of that water heater that is cheaper to replace that component and get another decade out of the rest of the frame of the water heater than to replace the whole tank, than to replace the whole piece of equipment. So a lot of the equipment on the HVAC side and the plumbing side, technology, cameras and all that kind of stuff is a different story and a different lifespan. But a lot of those systems have the main framework, I guess I'd call it, if you think of the chassis of a car and the body panels and whatnot, and there's an engine in the car, just like a car, an automobile, the building and the water heaters and boilers and some of the pumps even have components that you would typically replace maybe halfway through the full life expectancy of the whole thing. Built-up air handling units like you guys have in this new building, typically you're not replacing the whole thing, okay? The framework, the walls of the air handler is fine, they'll last for 60 years because there's no technology, there's nothing going on there. But you will replace components of the air handler. So a fan motor would be one of the first things, and every once in a while you'll replace a coil inside the air handler, but fortunately you're not replacing the whole air handler, it's just components of the air handler.
I picked water heater for another purpose, okay?
Sure.
This is kind of where I think we need to kind of go and talk through. What the PVI water heater has an igniter that manufacturer, they recommend replacing every 2 years. It's not a high expensive thing, it's a small igniter that will go in. I've asked Kenny Smith to come up as well. Between Kenny and you, how would you look at an igniter? Would that be part of an operation budget?
Over to the microphone if you would, please.
Kenny Schmitz, Woodbury County Building Services.
An igniter, would it be part of the operating budget of what it takes, or is that part of the maintenance? I think that's really, Chairman, excuse me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the kind of detail we're trying to get to in defining this for everybody is what goes where.
I would agree.
Yeah, an igniter, well, I'll let you answer first, and then I'll see if my answer lines up with yours. if you
Igniter,
want.
To the microphone, please.
an igniter is usually a part considered a maintenance repair item.
So out of the county's budget or out of the maintenance?
That is usually would be out of a county operating budget.
Yeah, and I would agree. Chillers have a similar scenario, how you maintain them, punching tubes, and there's routine maintenance that happens, replacing igniters, maybe some maintenance items that on a machine you don't do them every single year, but maybe every third year you do them. So that wouldn't come out of the maintenance fund, that would come out of the county fund. Some of those consumables and some of those parts and pieces, I would consider those consumables, igniters and things like that. If it gets to be, half of the value of the whole asset, if we talk about a boiler as an asset or a water heater as an asset, if it gets to be half of the value of the whole asset, then it's probably out of the maintenance fund, but anything less than that would be kind of considered routine, similar to your automobile, flushing your radiator, maybe having to do some transmission work every once in a while. That's not the magnitude of replacing your whole vehicle. It's just some routine maintenance that you don't have to do every single year, but it's stuff that you have to do. And maybe it's three, every other year, once every third year.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Kenny Smith's Director of Building Services has given me a document that he would like to interject into the record for this conversation.
I make a motion that we accept the document.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
And I didn't know if you were, wanted to move into that, what I've got there for a document and some information, or if you wanted to keep Dale on a run here on items he was talking about. So just let me know how you'd like to go with that.
I think go ahead, and I'm going to hand one to Dale,
Okay?
and that way you guys can kind of talk through that together, because
Sure, so this is a document
Can we
I
get you
made-
to the microphone, please?
Absolutely. So this is a document I made, not necessarily to deal with the new law enforcement center, but to deal with explaining all building, operating, and budgeting costs and project costs, things like that. So you'll see three different categories, blue, green, and orangish. The blue one is operating expenses, and under operating expenses are preventative maintenance budget items and common repair budget items, which are different, but they do all fall under an annual operating expense budget. The other two categories, the center green one is a cash reserve. What a cash reserve is basically a maintenance savings fund. In other words, let's talk about your own home, and you want to replace carpet 5 years down the road from now. You save money and you put it in the bank every month, so when 5 years comes and you want to replace that carpet, the money is there, it's in that savings fund for you. It's ready to go, it's ready to be spent when you need it. The next item in orange category is the capital improvement. That's a CapEx. What a capital improvement is just what it says. It extends the life of your building, it increases the value of your building, and it also falls under Chapter 28 bid law in Iowa. What that means is, for a county such as Woodbury, you have a cap on how much you can spend when borrowing that money, and that is an interest account. You go to a bank, you borrow that money, it's usually on a 5 or 10-year revolving account that you're borrowing that interest on. Special things with Chapter 28 is you have to bid most of those projects. There's special requirements. You have to have a hearing, let everyone be heard on those projects. Again, there's a cap on how much you can spend. I think currently the county is at 1.3 million. So if the county were to hit a project that is over 1.3 million, they cannot do it without going out and getting the public vote and approval to do so. Now, if they went to the public with a vote and asked to expend over 1.3 million, and the public voted that down, you couldn't do your repair or your addition or whatever it is you want to do with that building. You just couldn't do it. So, and in each one of those categories, I've tried to list several items because they don't all fall under one category. They blend boundaries. You can start off with something like, let's just say a garage door opener at your home or in an LEC or wherever you're at. You're going to have annual maintenance you're going to need to do. If you ask your service technician, he's going to tell you to lube the spring on that door if it has one. If you don't, you're not maintaining that piece of equipment like you should be. That's when it could turn into, if you're an LEC or a large building and this is a large door that's when it could turn into one of the other categories. All of a sudden, that spring breaks. If it's a big facility, it's a big door, that's an expensive spring. Just to use that as an example, that's when you could hit an area that exceeds the amount of money that's budgeted under your normal operating expense. You might need to move into the next category as a cash reserve if you have one, or you might need to have to do a capital improvement if it's not just a garage spring, if it's something else, you have to replace the whole door, let's say. Just trying to give you a small example of what falls under each one of those categories and how they blend. Another one might be just a simple door lock. Door lock quits functioning. That's a maintenance item. You go and repair the door lock. Well, what if it's a detention door lock? That's going to be probably $1,500 to $1,800 or more just for that lock. Well, you buy one, you put it in, that's a maintenance repair. That's under operating budgets. Well, what if you all of a sudden have, let's say you're several years down the road and now you've got upwards of 20 or 30 of them that need to be replaced. You're out of your operating budget, and that's not something you annually do. Now you're moving into one of those other categories. So all that to try to give you an example of what those are. And if you look at the bottom of that sheet I handed out, there's a little more information, and Dale didn't speak to this, but he may. When determining if you're going to set up a cash reserve or a maintenance budget, normally what you would do is look at, if you look at the center paragraph at the bottom where it starts with reserve funding for major repairs, there's things that you look at, the A, B, and the C, the estimated dates that you're estimating that those repairs might be needed. In other words, nothing lasts forever. Currently, you buy a new refrigerator, it's supposed to be good for 10 years. So you estimate that life at 10 years on that refrigerator. Same with other equipment. You estimate what that life of that piece of equipment is going to be. You also estimate what the cost for the repair or the replacement is going to be. That's B. C, you compile a useful life chart of all the equipment that's involved in your building or your home. That goes into that chart. That tells you what years you're expecting to hit this dollar amount for this repair. That's what this is all about, is to help everyone understand, because most people don't understand the difference between an operating expense, which is an annual budget, and the other expenses, which really are major repairs or improvements. Hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you. One more thing I wanted to add for Dale, I think. So everybody thinks about your house. I mean, it's the simplest thing, or your shop or anything. But I want you to talk a little bit about, we've got $300,000 worth of pumps in this building that are purely to get the water to the building. So this has a domestic water pump and fire pumps, fills up a whole room. So because the water pressure, everybody may not remember anymore, may not even been around, the water pressure was not high enough out where this jail was being constructed. So the city helped contribute money to buy a domestic water and domestic fire pump. That's great. There's added energy that those pumps cost, but there's also maintenance that goes along with those pumps, and replacement isn't in your normal house, so it's something that you guys put forethought into having money there, because when that pump fails, you no longer can get water out of your shower on the second floor. I mean, that's just an example. You do things much better than me, so you're
So
not used to a normal building having domestic water pumps or fire pumps in there, right?
Correct, yeah. Typically city pressure has enough to be able to push the domestic water to the faucets and shower heads and everything. This building does have the booster pumps to be able to get that. So the pumps that are used in there have a similar lifespan as the pumps you would use, for a chiller loop or a boiler loop or things of that nature. An inline pump typically lives 10 years. They're more almost a direct drive, disposable, throwaway type of thing. They live 10 years, and they're just the pipes traveling like this, and there's a flange and a pump that's right there. A base mounted pump sits on the floor. It's typically a higher horsepower pump. There's components, alignment of that pump is really important. But a base mounted pump can easily last 20 years if it's aligned properly. There's components of that pump that can be replaced. And similar to an air handling unit, quite often you won't replace the whole pump. Maybe the motor will go out, you'll replace the motor. But a lot of times the coupling that connects the motor to the impeller is something, if it's aligned properly and you get that maintained properly, that the volute is the fancy word for the part that the water flows through the pump, will last 20 years. It's a casting. There's no technology in there to fail whatsoever, and it'll last 20 years. There's several buildings we take care of where the water quality, making sure that you're doing good water treatment on your closed loop systems is super important. The cost to do that is relative to the damage that can be done if you don't do it is super low. We've done maintenance in buildings that the piping system is 30 years old and you open it up and it's like it's brand new because they've done a really good job of making sure water treatment is top priority. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but pumps typically are moving water. Sometimes they're moving fuel, but it's a liquid of some sort. And the pump technology has not advanced much in the last 50 years. It's just a motor that spins an impeller. But typically an inline pump is going to last 10 years and a base mounted pump is a longer lasting. And I believe most of the pumps that you have are the base mounted type, higher horsepower base mounted, good pumps that should easily last 20 years.
I think we've given quite a bit of background. I don't know where you are filling out your list, but I'd like to go to you guys for questions of Dale or Kenny. We're getting really close to our 2:30 time.
Understand.
And we'll continue this conversation after our 3:30 closed session, but just letting everybody know, ask questions.
I guess, Kenny, it's kind of different, I see it a little bit differently as opposed to like your regular county buildings where you have your operating budget for maintenance and then you come to the Board of Supervisors if there's a big expenditure or whatever. The county owns those buildings, or most of them, I know some, but with this, we're the tenant essentially. And so when I look through some of these, I think about like what my banker would tell me is I wouldn't put money into something that's permanently affixed to my landlord's property, right? So some of this stuff, I almost, like a lot of this, like some of the maintenance stuff I think is even okay, but like when you talk about like the boilers or the pumps, well, if hypothetical, if the LEC wanted to kick out Woodbury County and rent a jail to somebody else, the pumps would have to be working. So like to me, I don't know that I necessarily see that that's Woodbury County's responsibility because those pumps would have to be operating or in operating condition in order for the LEC to lease that building or like, things in that regard. So I'm not, maybe I'm disagreeing with you, maybe I'm not, but that's just, I kind of see it more as like a tenant type relationship as Woodbury County is the tenant and,
Right. I'll respond to that. Firstly, yes, basically Woodbury County is a tenant, but this is a little bit different situation. The county is in the seat of being the rent to own in that
for sure. Yep,
situation.
yep.
So you're going to want to preserve this, or this building is going to be in the county's advantage to be maintained as well as it can be, because in 20 years or 18 or whatever that is, it will become the county's. So basically every dollar spent, they'll be basically getting back if they take care of it.
Unsolicited comment or just observation in working with your team, Kenny's team, and Ron and everybody, the level of detail that even if you stop and don't make any more progress than you've already made, there's very few clients, even in the private sector, that I've seen that take the amount of time and effort that you guys have put into creating a budget, what's it going to take, and at least having a shot at knowing what you need to do. Are you going to exactly follow the script? Probably not. But I've seen counties that they don't have a script whatsoever. They're just getting that sucker built and moving in, and sometimes they don't even have an operations budget. They build it and they can't even occupy it because they haven't staffed it. They didn't plan beyond the end of their nose. And so you guys have done as good a job or better as far as the clients that I've helped and been involved with. You guys have dove deeper into it than certainly any county that I've ever worked with. So kudos again, even if you don't make any more progress than what you've done today. you're still light years ahead of what most entities are doing.
Excuse me, it is 2:30 and we do need to go into closed session.
And we will come back, close